Welcome to Gunship.
Hello again. This is Philippe from Massive this time, and not from Flash Develop. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what's in the presentation, so let's go. So I'm going to talk about hacks in Massive. So our business is to deliver TV everywhere. That is easy, right? We just have like mobiles, tablets, desktop, TVs, consoles. That is Android, iOS, lots of browsers, lots of TVs, lots of consoles. Then PlayStation 3, 4, Xbox 360, Tizen, Samsung. You mean Samsung Smart TV or Samsung Tizen or LG Nestcast or LG WebOS? It's like every single manufacturer created his own platform and even creates several platforms in the case of some. So we have like JavaScript, sometimes OpenGL, Flash, Android, C, C++, this idiotic Bright script. Then you have the options of the video encoding delivery mechanism. Then you have the DRM options. So even if you try to simplify things a bit like that, you still have additional options like do you have voice gestures, voice control gestures, touch, mouse. Plus, you usually have completely broken APIs, impossible to debug devices, barely any documentation. That's a lot of fun. So, a lot of things to manage. And that's why a few years ago, Massive moved to Haxe. So here we are. Confronted to the appeal to write both Flash, JavaScript, native, and all that. So we built our own set of frameworks. The choice of Haxe was very much about this cross-platform aspect, but also because it has incredible benefits in terms of conditional compilation. That is, within a code base, within one class, you can switch implementation depending on your target. Then you have the type defs that allow you to switch completely entire implementations depending on your target, or make different views completely. Then the macro mechanism that allows to generate code for you, to make sure that your application is rock solid before you push it to the device, because you won't be able to debug on the device. So you have to be really sure that it's going to work. Nico for writing the toolchain, because we have our internal toolchain. So that's why Massive became one of the biggest concentration of Haxe developers. But I think we're challenged by Game Duel. But we'll fight back. So we contributed a lot to Haxe open source. Normally, David Peake would be able to brag that he wrote half of these libraries. So I won't be able to brag to pretend that, but that's all of Massive contributions. And I think it set the basics a few years ago already to building applications in an enterprise way. And So a lot of people are using Haxe, whether they want it or not. So these are, for instance, 3 major TV channels in their own countries. And these apps we make, like Channel 5 is available on 12 platforms, from UView to Xbox One. So I have a bunch of slides with screenshots. So interestingly, that's still the same Channel 5 app, but we just with some massive conditional compilation to switch it to something completely different. Plus, obviously, the fact that it can run on a great variety of devices without driving the developers insane. Crave TV, Demand 5, everywhere you want. So that's an example of the Demand 5, that is video on demand for Channel 5. So it started like as a first effort to make a core application in 6 months. Then after 6 months, we had 7 targets, a big upgrade of backend system, more targets. Every 6 months, we've had like, 7, 8 more, etc. 1 application a month. So this has been going for a very long time, and there's a huge lot of targets to support. We have Dendy Direct, which is an Australian video-on-demand platform for which we target a lot of devices, and including the browser. So it has a web application, even for VOD, plus a mobile, tablet one. So we have a native player. This is all based on Haxe and our UI framework and toolchain and all that. Then the newest one is Bell Media, which is absolutely considerable in Canada, and Crave TV, a very popular TV channel. So same story, lots of targets, and a website. Are you dead? Boy. Try again. Oh, it didn't like the resolution change. Oh, we have Dendy working. Okay, hello Dendy. So this looks like a website, but it's a Haxe application. And truth be told, you shouldn't check the HTML here. Because this is approached like an application, and this is using essentially the same components that we'll have in the TV apps and all that. So it's designed to be not nice HTML, but we have been working on doing things better. So you have this kind of things with apps you can watch, plus presentations of the movies. You can buy them, you can play them within your browser, with the DRMs and all that, because that's how things have to be done. Yeah. So I think that was about it. A lot of things. So we wanted definitely to release more open source libraries lately, but we've been taken by work, and we didn't have any really interesting library to release. So the Massive Unit 2 and our own compilation toolchain, or our own dependency manager, all the kind of tools that other companies just have released, like GameDuo and all that. So we do have all these kind of tools in Haxe, Nico, and all that, just not really ready to be released. And especially if you release something, you have to maintain it. I mean, you have to provide the support for it. So we feel kind of busy, and we already barely manage the communication and pull requests and issues that for what we have released already. So, but we'll come to release some more things. So that's all, folks.
Okay, so on the consoles and set-top boxes, are you using the HTML5 target, or are you using some sort of native thing you've written yourself, or what are you doing on the stuff that's not traditionally a web browser target to get there? Are you using Flash, or are you using Target, or whatever?
A few years ago, you would have Air as an option to make apps. So this is disappearing. And if there's one thing that TV makers agreed on is that they didn't want Air anymore. So it's all HTML, like embedded Opera or Chrome. That's what you get. And so essentially, we're building HTML apps nowadays.
You don't provide any kind of native SDK for most of these boxes?
Some do provide native SDKs. The problem is that usually they don't provide the video and DRM options when you have the native SDK. You have to be Netflix to ask them to implement your native platform on their devices. This is so unfair.
What do they ever tell you why they don't do it? Is it just because they don't want to bother because it's too much work for them, or has like Netflix paid them a lot of money under the table to cut you out?
I think Netflix can afford and to get them to do that. So either there's a mutual interest in getting that done, or they just pressure them, or maybe they pay them. Who knows? Otherwise, TV makers. And set-top box makers, I mean, decide on what is the easiest and cleanest way to encapsulate an application. And probably TiVo will confirm, but when you have something that you can't control, you just give them an embedded browser, and you know that if it dies, it will die alone without taking with it the entire system. So that's how it's done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just a random thought. We have TiVo using Haxe, we have Massive using Haxe. You are not, TiVo is box maker, but maybe it would make sense at some point to somehow propose to have some kind of API that box makers can use or something, and you know.
Well, I think we could ask TiVo, what is the rationale to provide application makers only a web browser? What is the risk they see in providing native SDKs? Because it's all comes from a very pragmatic reason. So the best they can do is to provide you good APIs within the web browser, because that's the only safe way to do it.
Yeah, so I actually have questions for you, but on these notes, I think one interesting thing at TiVo is, again, we don't sell here, so maybe a lot of people aren't as familiar with our product, but we both sell a box, and in that case, we're like a TV manufacturer, and we provide an app environment, and we have lots of apps that run on our device. Some within Opera, as Alfred mentioned earlier, but we also have some applications that are ported and are native, and they can crash our device. We don't like that they can crash our device. They tend to run faster, and it's easier to get them going sometimes than the ones that run in the browser. So we actually do both, but the ones that run natively tend to be the very large manufacturers of, you know, the most premier apps. So Netflix, Voodoo, things like this. We would prefer everybody to be in an app environment, but we ourselves also build apps that run on smart TVs and mobile devices. So we're very much on both sides of the equation. And so it's interesting to see the difference sometimes between the application environment we provide to an app vendor and then the one that's provided to us when we try to go to another platform. And they vary exactly widely. Like, I want your first 8 slides to present to my executives, because sometimes they don't always understand how hard doing these things is. But those are great slides.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair enough to limit to HTML because, as we've seen in K presentation and all that, as soon as you offer a native environment, that means you have to get into all the native OpenGL rendering compilers with the right CPU or whatever. So it's usually more complex to build apps for that. So in a way, it's true that Netflix will afford having the engineering necessary to build a native app for each and every platform, which is something that even we can't afford. But TV manufacturers won't agree on this unified, easy-to-use native SDK.
Hi. So the question is, you have like apps for mobile target and apps for the web. Is this like a separate project with a common code base, or how do you structure that?
So we do have a number of, so if we're talking about the different TV targets, it's generally TV consoles, even browser, it's usually one project. And this one project will use type defs to switch what is the video player implementation, what is the DRM implementation, what is the view layout that we want to use. So we switch at compile time the implementations. So generally that's one project. Then we do have a number of mobile projects. Like for that, we're still looking into the best solution, and so we do have project based like on PhoneGap, like the Crave TV app or the Demand5 mobile app. No, the Crave TV mobile app is a PhoneGap app. It has the problems of all mobile PhoneGap apps. So we're now looking to go taking an Android developer to make an Android app, an iOS developer to make an iOS app. So that's likely going to be the way to go because we have this problem of not having a native UI, a native capable UI solution, which means maybe the work of Daniel with Quacks would be a good solution to have native component and native user experience. So currently, unless that can solve this problem, we're probably going to bake out of using hacks for native apps.
One more question.
So we have some hope for Quacks. Yeah.
One more question. You mentioned like ugly HTML. Does this mean inline CSS also?
That will depend. That will depend. If you control everything by code, you tend to script an inline CSS. Again, using inline CSS or CSS classes without the regard of if you have something that is simple to do, there's no. Maybe Daniel will inform that, but I don't think there's a very big difference in terms of performance. But again, we're working on the line between some projects use everything defined by code as inline CSS through the framework because it's all encapsulated. It's a framework, pushes, abstracts, all that. Some other projects are using CSS. As we're moving to a more unified everything's HTML on all these devices, we're going to add more CSS. So it's still, nothing is completely frozen.
Thanks.
Hey, so there's this library from Silex, I think, Cocktail. Have you guys ever used it? I think it's Cocktail or something like that.
Cocktail? No. I think we've looked a bit into that. I don't know what the conclusions were, but it didn't really fit what we wanted to do, possibly because we already have a UI framework. So we already have a UI abstraction that handles containers, focus management, layout, constraints. So we would be abstracting another abstraction on another abstraction. So that's
right. And you mentioned that you guys have like some interesting projects that you like to make open source, right?
Sorry?
Some interesting projects that you like to make open source. Can you talk briefly about like some of them?
What we do, so one major part of our work is we have a dependency manager, a library manager, because by design, Haxlib doesn't allow you to have multiple sources. Like, you can't have private sources. So you can't just use one tool to...
Something like bundler for Ruby?
Something like?
Something like bundler for Ruby? Like, you can have different sources and private sources?
Something like Haxlib, where you can do Haxlib install my private library. You better not see that online. So that's why we have a tool called MPM, with an M, and it does the dependency management. So it has a number of sources, so like repository sources, which we should remind you what GameDuel is doing. And it can get the sources, it configures Haxlib with that, and you can use it in the project.
That's very cool. Do you have an ETA on when you're planning to release?
Well, we have a new version being worked on internally. So this is kind of thing that when that is done, and if there's really a demand on that, if there's not already a tool that does it. Plus, even internally, we have competing approaches. Like there's another approach that's been developed by one of our engineers, which is YHaxen. So YHaxen is released, it's open source, and it's a pretty fantastic tool. So it's handling your libraries, and it will configure the project, handle the building, running the tests, etc. But it's a fairly different approach than Haxlib. You really specify that I have this dependency with this URL, this dependency with this URL, etc., etc. Then, so it's something between some sort of ANT for Haxe. Although I know that these guys are using ANT and YHaxen, where they're using ANT to run YHaxen, which will run ANT to do some operations. Things get a bit messy sometimes. But yeah, YHaxen, I can recommend that. That's been released, and it's a very solid tool. What? Thank you again. Cool.
Welcome to Gunship.